Hey everyone, and welcome to another deep dive.
Yeah,
This time, we're taking a look at Axis Bank.
it's gonna be a good one.
I think so, yeah. As you probably know, they're one of the giants in the Indian banking world.
One of the biggest.
And today, we're going to be digging deep into their 2023-24 annual report.
Lots to uncover.
Oh, absolutely. And we're not just going to be focusing on like the raw numbers, the financial statements. We really want to get a sense of their overall strategy.
The big picture.
Exactly. What challenges they're facing, in this kind of crazy global economic environment.
Lots of uncertainty out there.
So much. And, of course, where they see themselves going in the future.
What they're betting on.
Right. Exactly. So, I think it's safe to say that most of you are at least somewhat familiar with Axis Bank.
Yeah, familiar with the name, for sure.
But their story is actually pretty fascinating. They started out as one of the first private sector banks in India way back in 1994.
That's right, back when the RBI was really pushing for, reforms in the financial sector.
Right, like opening it up, creating
Right.
more competition.
Exactly.
And now, fast forward to today, and they have this amazing network of, get this, 5,000 branches.
5,000. It's incredible, right? I mean, that kind of reach across all those different regions of India really shows their commitment to connecting with what they call Bharat, like the heart of India.
Yeah, that 5,000th branch.
Yeah.
It's a huge milestone. But what I think is really interesting is that they're not just focused on this kind of traditional brick and mortar expansion.
Right. They're not just about physical branches anymore.
They're really going all in on digital transformation.
Big time.
And they're forming these really interesting partnerships, kind of thinking outside the box.
Forging new paths.
Totally. And they're even making some serious moves in the area of sustainability.
Which for a bank is not always, top of mind.
Right, exactly. You don't always associate banks with, like, saving the planet or whatever.
Yeah, it's not the first thing you think of.
But they're really trying to change that perception.
Yeah, and what really struck me when I was going through the report is how they're trying to kind of tie all of these different threads together.
Okay, I'm all ears.
So they have what they call their House of GPS strategy.
House of GPS. That's catchy.
Right. Think of it like their navigation system for growth.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Break it down for me. What's the GPS stand for?
Okay, so the G is for growth, obviously.
Of course, gotta have growth.
But it's not just growth for the sake of growth.
Right, gotta be smart about it.
Exactly. They're really laser focused on certain segments that they see as having huge potential, like, SMEs.
Small and medium enterprises, right.
Exactly. And small businesses, mid-corporate lending, rural markets.
They're going where the action is.
Totally. Tapping into those sectors that are really driving the Indian economy forward.
Makes sense. So that's G for growth. What about the P?
P is for profitability.
Well, obviously, they're a bank. They need to be profitable.
Of course. But it's more than just, making money. They're really emphasizing this idea of consistent earnings.
Right, so it's not just about like a one-time windfall. It's about building a sustainable, profitable business for the long term.
Exactly. Building something that can weather the storms, so to speak.
Right, which brings us to the S.
S for sustainability.
And this is where it gets really interesting, right? Because, what does sustainability even mean for a bank? It's not like they're, emitting greenhouse gases or polluting rivers.
Right. It's not the most obvious connection.
So how are they approaching this?
Well, they're trying to go beyond that kind of superficial greenwashing that you see a lot of companies doing these days.
Oh, yeah, just slapping a green label on things and calling it a day?
Exactly. They're really trying to integrate what they call ESG, environmental, social, and governance considerations into everything they do.
Okay, that's more like it.
So, for example, they're taking steps to reduce their own carbon footprint. Things like switching to energy-efficient lighting in their branches, investing in renewable energy sources.
So they're walking the walk, not just talking the talk.
Exactly. And they're also looking at the bigger picture. They're supporting businesses that are aligned with sustainability goals.
So like investing in companies that are developing clean energy technologies or promoting sustainable agriculture.
Exactly. And they're offering what they call green financing options, loans with favorable terms for companies that are making a positive environmental impact.
It sounds like they're really trying to be a force for good.
Yeah, they're definitely trying to lead by example.
Okay, so we have the House of GPS, growth, profitability, sustainability. And they're clearly committed to this whole sustainability thing. But how are they actually executing on all this? They're not operating in a vacuum, right?
Right, they're not immune to what's happening in the rest of the world.
Exactly. What about the global economic context? I mean, things have been pretty volatile lately.
to say the least.
So how did that factor into their performance in 2023?
Well, they acknowledge in the report that 2023 was a bit of a mixed bag, globally speaking.
Makes sense. I mean, we had the war in Ukraine, inflation going crazy, supply chain disruptions.
Oh, all of that.
So how did Axis Bank navigate all of that?
Well, they basically played to their strengths. They really doubled down on those growth segments that we talked about earlier, the ones that were aligned with the domestic macro trends in India.
Okay, so they kind of focused on what they could control, what was happening within India.
Exactly. And that paid off. They saw a 26% year-on-year growth in those areas.
That's huge. But, I mean, they must face some challenges too, right?
Oh, for sure. But remember that strong balance sheet we talked about earlier? That really helped them weather the storm.
Makes sense. Like having a solid foundation to fall back on when things get tough.
Exactly. And they really emphasize this idea of being like a resilient, all-weather institution.
Right, so they're in it for the long haul no matter what the economy throws at them.
Exactly. They're trying to build something that can withstand any challenge.
Which is really reassuring, I think, especially in these uncertain times. Now, one thing that really stood out to me in the report is this whole idea of customer centricity.
That's a big thing for them.
It's not just about providing banking services. They're really trying to become what they call India's most customer-obsessed bank.
I love that. Customer obsessed.
Right. And they're doing this through this program called Sparsh.
Sparsh, which I think means touch in Hindi. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a very appropriate name, given their focus on, like, really connecting with their customers.
Right. Understanding their needs, exceeding their expectations.
So what's the story behind Sparsh? What are they actually doing?
Well, it's more than just a program. It's like a philosophy that's woven into their entire operations.
Okay, I like that. A philosophy.
Right. It's about really listening to customers, understanding their pain points, and then going above and beyond to solve their problems.
So it's not just about, like, lip service. It's about actually taking action.
Exactly. And the proof is in the pudding, as they say. Their Net Promoter Score, or NPS, jumped from 4th to 2nd amongst large peer banks.
That's a huge leap. It seems like customers are really noticing the difference.
They definitely are.
And what's really impressive is that they're not just focused on, urban areas.
Right. Not just the big cities.
They're also having a lot of success in what they call Farat, the rural and semi-urban markets.
That's where their Farat banking initiative comes in.
Right. And they're seeing some amazing results there, too, like a 1.7x growth in rural balance sheets.
That's remarkable.
There are a 30% increase in disbursements through Farat banking. Those are serious numbers.
It shows that they're really committed to reaching those underserved communities.
And it's not just about, transplanting their urban banking model into rural areas.
Right. It's not a one-size-fits-all approach.
They're really trying to create tailored solutions,
Hmm.
Understanding the unique needs of those communities.
Exactly. And they're using technology in really innovative ways to bridge that gap in financial services.
Yeah, speaking of technology, they're a powerhouse in digital payments.
Huge.
Yeah.
And acquiring merchant terminals.
I mean, you see Axis Bank POS terminals everywhere you go.
Everywhere. Which is a testament to their reach and their, technological prowess.
For sure. And they've even launched this thing called Digital Dukan.
Right. Which is a smart POS application that they developed with Visa.
It seems like the perfect timing, too, with India's, increasing adoption of digital payments.
Absolutely. It's riding that wave.
Totally. And they're not just, relying on off-the-shelf solutions either.
Right. They're not just buying whatever's out there.
They're developing their own innovative lending products.
Using this platform called the Public Tech Platform for Frictionless Credit.
Catchy name.
It is, right? They like their acronyms.
It's like alphabet soup sometimes.
I know, right? But anyway, this PTPFC is really about using technology to make financial services more accessible, especially for those who have traditionally been excluded.
Okay, so I think we've covered a lot of ground already.
We have. We've got this house of GPS, strategy, growth, profitability, sustainability.
And they're really putting their money where their mouth is, especially when it comes to sustainability.
They're not just greenwashing.
Definitely not. They're really trying to be a responsible corporate citizen, reaching underserved communities, empowering women.
It's refreshing to see.
It is. But as always, the devil's in the details.
Always is.
So in part 2 of this deep dive, we're going to take a closer look at some of the specific initiatives and strategies that Axis Bank is using to execute on this ambitious vision.
Get into the nitty-gritty.
Exactly. So stay tuned for that.
Looking forward to it.
Me too. Okay, so we've spent a good chunk of time already talking about Axis Bank's, broad commitments to growth and sustainability and all that.
Yeah, the big picture.
But I want to dive into some specifics now. Like, what are some of the actual, nuts and bolts initiatives that they're putting into place?
Right, get into the weeds a little bit.
Exactly. Because, it's one thing to say you're committed to something, but it's another thing entirely to actually make it happen.
Absolutely, actions speak louder than words.
Totally. So one thing that really caught my eye in the report was this whole focus on premiumization.
That's interesting.
Yeah, especially within their wealth management business, which they call Burgundy.
Okay, yeah, Burgundy. I remember them mentioning that.
They're seeing some crazy growth in that segment, like 50% year-on-year growth in assets under management.
50%. That's insane.
I know, right? So clearly they're doing something right. What's the secret sauce?
Well, I think it's about, recognizing that high net worth individuals, they have different needs.
Right, they're not just looking for a basic savings account.
Exactly. So Axis is providing these really specialized financial solutions, tailored to their specific requirements.
Okay, so what does that look like in practice?
Well, for one thing, it's about access,
Yeah.
access to exclusive investment opportunities, things that the average person wouldn't even know about.
Oh, I see. So it's about giving them a leg up in the market.
Exactly. And it's also about providing that really high-touch, personalized service.
Like having a dedicated relationship manager who's on call 24/7.
Right. Someone who understands their unique needs and goals.
Okay, that makes sense. So it's kind of like they're creating this whole ecosystem of financial services
The whole,
for these ultra-wealthy individuals.
yeah, catering to their every whim.
Now, while we're talking about growth, I want to circle back to those rural and semi-urban markets.
Ah, right.
Right, Farad. Because their Farad banking initiative seems to be going from strength to strength.
Oh, it is.
The report mentioned that they've almost doubled their rural balance sheet in the past 2 years.
It's incredible how much progress they've made in such a short time.
I know. And they've done it by, really thinking outside the traditional branch model.
Right. They're not just setting up shop in every village.
It's about being smart and strategic.
And recognizing that technology has a huge role to play.
So how are they using technology to reach those rural communities?
Well, one way is through these common service centers, or CSCs.
I've heard of those. They're like these little kiosks, right, that offer various government and private services.
Exactly. And Axis has partnered with over 64,000 of them.
64,000, that's a massive network.
It is. And each CSC has a village-level entrepreneur, or VLE, who basically acts as a local touch point for Axis Bank.
So it's like having a mini bank in every village.
Pretty much. The VLEs can help people open accounts, make deposits, access microloans, things like that.
And it's all powered by technology.
Of course. They're using mobile banking apps, biometric authentication, all the latest stuff.
So it's this really clever combination of physical presence and digital reach.
Tailored to the specific needs of those communities.
It's really impressive how they're able to bridge that gap in financial services.
And it's working. They're seeing strong growth in deposits, disbursements, all the key metrics.
Yeah, it's clear that they're onto something special with this Bharat banking initiative.
It's a model that a lot of other banks are trying to replicate, actually.
I can see why. Okay, so we've talked about premiumization, we've talked about rural banking. Let's switch gears now and talk about their wholesale banking business.
Okay.
This is where they cater to those larger corporate clients.
The big fish.
Exactly. And the report highlights how they've really been focusing on building those relationships.
Right. It's not just about transactional banking anymore.
It's about understanding the client's needs, becoming a trusted advisor,
A partner in their growth.
and they're leveraging those One Axis capabilities that we talked about earlier to provide that kind of holistic, integrated approach.
Offering the whole suite of services.
Exactly. And the results speak for themselves. They've seen a 19% year-on-year growth in advances in their focused business segments within wholesale banking.
That's impressive.
They're also gaining market share in transaction banking, which is leading to steady growth in fee income.
So they're making money on both ends of the spectrum.
They're firing on all cylinders, basically.
And what's really interesting is that they're working with this whole new generation of businesses.
Like those unicorns we hear so much about.
Exactly. The startups that are valued at over $1 billion.
They're the ones who are driving innovation and growth in India.
And Axis Bank is right there with them, providing the financial support they need to scale up.
Smart move, getting in on the ground floor with these future giants.
It's all about positioning themselves for the long term.
Okay, so they've got a lot going on in the domestic market.
They do.
But they're also expanding their footprint internationally, right?
That's right. They have a growing overseas book, which is about 10% of their overall corporate loan book.
So they're not just content with being a big fish in India. They want to swim in the global pond.
Exactly. But they're doing it strategically, focusing on opportunities that make sense.
Not just chasing growth for the sake of growth.
Right. It's got to be profitable and sustainable.
Which brings us back to that idea of customer obsession, which is really like a golden thread running through this entire report.
Yeah, it pops up everywhere you look.
It's not just talk either. Their Net Promoter Score ranking has jumped from 4th to 2nd among large peer banks.
That's a huge testament to their efforts.
It shows that they're actually making a difference in how they treat their customers.
And it's not just about happy customers either.
Right. It's about creating a culture where everyone in the organization is focused on that goal.
Exactly. It's got to be embedded in the DNA of the company.
Totally. Okay, so I think we've covered a lot of ground in this part.
We have. We've talked about premiumization, Bharat banking, wholesale banking, customer obsession, international expansion.
It's a lot to take in.
It is, but it gives you a good sense of the breadth and depth of Axis Bank's operations.
And how they're really firing on all cylinders.
They're definitely a force to be reckoned with.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But, as we've seen, the financial landscape is constantly evolving.
Things change so quickly these days.
So in part 3 of this deep dive, we're going to take a closer look at some of the challenges that Axis Bank is facing.
The headwinds.
Exactly. And how they're positioning themselves to not just survive, but thrive in this dynamic environment.
It's all about staying ahead of the curve.
Totally. So stay tuned for that.
Can't wait.
All right, so we've explored Axis Bank's strengths, their commitment to growth, sustainability, customer obsession, all that good stuff.
Yeah, they've got a lot going for them.
They really do.
Yeah.
But no business operates in a vacuum, right?
Of course not. There are always challenges.
Exactly. And the banking sector especially is facing some pretty strong headwinds these days.
Oh, yeah. It's a tough environment out there.
So what are some of the key challenges that Axis Bank is up against? What are they wrestling with right now?
Well, one of the biggest ones is competition. I mean, the Indian banking landscape is getting more and more crowded, especially with the rise of all these fintech startups.
Yeah, those fintechs are really shaking things up.
They are. They're nimble, they're tech savvy, and they're not afraid to disrupt the status quo.
So how's Axis Bank responding to that challenge? I mean, they're kind of the establishment, right?
Yeah, they're the big established player, but they're not just sitting back and letting the fintechs eat their lunch.
Okay, good. So what are they doing?
Well, for one thing, they're embracing technology themselves. They're investing heavily in digital transformation, upgrading their systems, developing new digital products and services.
So they're kind of trying to beat the fintechs at their own game.
In a way, yeah. But they're also recognizing that they have certain advantages that the fintechs don't.
Like what?
Well, for one thing, they have a huge customer base.
Right. They've been around for a while. They've built up that trust.
Exactly. And they also have a lot of experience navigating the regulatory landscape, which can be pretty complex in India.
That's a good point. So they're kind of using their size and experience to their advantage.
Exactly. And they're also forming strategic partnerships with some of these fintechs.
Oh, that's smart.
It is. It's a win-win situation. The fintechs get access to Axis Bank's resources and customer base, and Axis Bank gets access to the fintech's innovation and agility.
So they're not just competing with them, they're also collaborating with them.
Exactly. They're recognizing that the future of banking is going to be a mix of traditional and fintech solutions.
That makes sense. It's about finding that right balance.
Totally. Now, another challenge that Axis Bank is facing, and this is something that all banks are dealing with right now, is this whole issue of rising interest rates.
Yeah, that's been in the news a lot lately.
It has, and for good reason. When interest rates go up, it becomes more expensive for people to borrow money.
Right, so people might be less likely to take out loans for things like homes or cars.
Exactly, and that can have a ripple effect throughout the economy.
So how is Axis Bank managing that risk?
Well, one thing they're doing is being very careful about who they lend to.
Right, making sure they're only lending to people who can actually afford to repay the loans.
Exactly. They're tightening their credit standards, doing more thorough risk assessments.
So it's about being more selective, more cautious.
Exactly. And they're also looking for ways to diversify their income streams.
So not just relying on interest income from loans.
Right. They're focusing more on fee-based income, things like wealth management, insurance, transaction fees.
So kind of spreading their bets, so to speak.
Exactly. Not putting all their eggs in one basket.
That's a good strategy, especially in these uncertain times.
It is. Now, another challenge that Axis Bank is facing and this is something that's unique to India, is this whole push towards financial inclusion.
Right, bringing more people into the formal banking system.
Exactly. It's a huge undertaking, but it's also a huge opportunity.
So how is Axis Bank approaching this?
Well, as we talked about earlier, they're really doubling down on their Bharat banking initiative, reaching those rural communities.
Right, making banking services accessible to everyone, regardless of their location or income level.
Exactly. And they're using technology in really innovative ways to do that, like those common service centers we talked about.
It's a massive logistical challenge, but they seem to be making good progress.
They are. But it's not just about reaching people, it's also about educating them.
Right, financial literacy is key.
Absolutely. A lot of people in India, especially in rural areas, don't have a lot of experience with formal banking.
So Axis Bank is also investing in financial literacy programs, teaching people about basic banking concepts, how to manage their money, things like that.
Exactly. It's about empowering people to make informed financial decisions.
Okay, so we've talked about competition, rising interest rates, financial inclusion. What else is on Axis Bank's radar?
Well, like any bank, they have to keep a close eye on cybersecurity.
Oh yeah, that's a big one these days.
Huge. With everything moving online, the risk of cyber attacks is only increasing.
And consequences can be devastating.
Absolutely. So Axis Bank is investing heavily in cybersecurity measures, upgrading their systems, strengthening their defenses, training their employees.
So it's about being proactive, staying ahead of the curve.
Exactly. And it's not just about technology, it's also about culture.
Right, making sure that everyone in the organization understands the importance of cybersecurity.
Totally. It's a shared responsibility.
Okay, so they're facing a lot of challenges, but they also seem to be well equipped to handle them.
Yeah, they're definitely not standing still.
They're adapting, innovating, constantly evolving.
That's the key to success in this industry.
Well, this has been a fascinating deep dive.
I've learned a lot.
Me too.
Yeah.
Axis Bank is clearly a complex and dynamic organization.
They're a microcosm of the Indian economy in a lot of ways.
That's a good way to put it. They're facing the same challenges, seizing the same opportunities.
And they're playing a key role in shaping the future of India.
Absolutely. Well, we've covered a lot of ground in this three-part deep dive.
We have, from the big picture to the nitty-gritty.
We've explored their strengths, their weaknesses, their strategies, their ambitions.
We've looked at their financial performance, their commitment to sustainability, their efforts to reach underserved communities.
We've even talked about the challenges they're facing and how they're adapting to this rapidly changing world.
It's been quite a journey.
It has. But as always, we want to leave you with something to think about.
A little food for thought.
Exactly. So, as you go about your day, consider this. What role do you think Axis Bank will play in shaping the future of India?
And what can we learn from their journey so far?
Those are big questions, but they're worth asking.
They are. Because the future of India is intertwined with the future of its financial institutions.
And Axis Bank is one of the most important players in that game.
Absolutely. So keep those questions in mind as you continue to explore and learn about this fascinating and impactful organization.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We hope you enjoyed it.
We'll see you next time.
Bye.